Good morning. Today we're going to have a copyright lesson for your class. Before we start, I want to give each of you a chance to show what you already know about copyright. Go to this link and take the pretest so we can see exactly what you know. Now, before we get into our actual lesson, we're going to have a quick role-playing activity. The purpose of this activity is to give each of you a personal experience with the concept of copyright. It's going to be broken down into two parts, so let's get started and do part one. Now that we're finished with part one, let's reflect a little bit. If you were person one, how did it feel when person two took your idea and claimed it as their own? If you were person two, how did it feel taking credit for something you know you didn't come up with? How is this situation unfair? And was it the right thing to do? Okay, now that we're finished with this activity, let's go move on to part two. Just like with part one, once we're finished with part two, we're going to have a moment to stop and reflect about what we just learned. If you were person two, how did it feel when person one wrote his or her name on your picture? If you were person one, how did it feel when you took person's two paper and put your name on it as if it were your own? Why do you think it is unfair to put your name on someone else's picture? Okay, now that we've all had a chance to experience and make a connection to copyright, let's get into the lesson. Something that I need you all to keep in mind as we go through this lesson is, if it isn't fair to steal someone else's ideas and pictures in real life, as we all just discovered, then it isn't right to steal ideas or pictures from books and websites either. So what is copyright? Before we dig deep into this, let's get some background knowledge. First, here are some vocabulary words you will need to know in order to get a complete understanding of copyright. First, copyright. Copyright is the legal protection of an original work. Fair use. Fair use allows a small portion of copyrighted work to be used without permission by a second user. The copyrighted work must be cited. Plagiarism. Plagiarism is copying someone else's work and trying to pass it off as your own or using someone's work word for word without giving credit to the original author. Citations. A citation is a reference to an author, book, or other created work. Public domain. Public domain are materials that are not protected by copyright. Anyone can use it, but no one can own it. Intellectual property. Intellectual property are creations of the mind that gives legal rights to whoever created the work. Creative Commons is an organization that works with many platforms to share licensed resources to help avoid copyright infringement. Copyright infringement is using a work that doesn't belong to you in some way without permission. This can result in serious penalties, so it's very important that you know how to avoid that. Let's give a little bit of history to copyright. Copyright is a little different in every country. Here in the United States, copyright is specifically mentioned in the Constitution in 1787. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution states, Congress shall have the power to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive rights to their respective writings and discoveries. Many historians believe that copyright was mentioned in the Constitution to encourage learning, discovery, and knowledge. Here are some examples of copyrights for books. This Harry Potter novel was published in 2005. This book is still under copyright protection and will be for the rest of J.K. Rowling's life for 70 plus more years. This other book was published in 1623 by William Shakespeare. It is no longer under the copyright protection. Another important part of copyright is fair use. Fair use often means that your teacher can make copies of a poem from Shel Silverstein to use in your class study of poetry for one lesson. Something you need to avoid, as we mentioned before, is plagiarism. Plagiarism comes if you've copied the same poem and claim that you wrote it. To prevent this, citations are very important. If you use this poem or refer to it, you will have to provide a citation giving credit to its author. Notice throughout this presentation there are several citations. Remember Shakespeare? His play, Romeo and Juliet, is part of the public domain now because it is no longer protected by copyright and anyone can quote Shakespeare or make films from Shakespeare's plays or perform Shakespeare's plays. Intellectual property. Intellectual property, as we mentioned before, are creations of the mind. These creations can be protected under copyright, trademark, patent, and other legal protections. Some examples of intellectual property include art, symbols, designs, images, names, logos, software, music, literary works, sculptures, architecture, choreography, and performances. All of these images are clip art provided by the software, so notice we did not have to put citations. It can get confusing trying to remember what you can and cannot use and how you can use it. Creative Commons is an organization that works to provide a way for ideas, products, images, and other kinds of intellectual property to be shared legally. Creators grant permission to Creative Commons to share their work. These are some of the symbols that explain the licensing agreements and how you can use the materials. This one right here is attribution. Others can copy, distribute, display, perform, and remix your work if they credit your name as requested by you. This symbol would be no derivative works. Others can only copy, distribute, display, or perform verbatim copies of your work. If there was this symbol, it's called share-alike. Others can distribute your work only under a license identical to the one you have chosen for your work. And the last one here is non-commercial. Others can copy, distribute, display, perform, or remix your work, but for non-commercial purposes only. So what does this all mean? Well, not everything in the library or internet is fair game. Do your research to find out if something is copyright protected or not. Always assume that any picture, article, poem, or idea that you find is under copyright or licensing protection. Learn about Creative Commons and open source information that you are allowed to use. Always, always give credit to your sources. Remember how it felt at the beginning when someone steals your own intellectual property. Be ethical, smart, and safe. I'm going to send you guys off now for a quick scavenger hunt, and I want you to use these resources to find your answers. All right, before we end the lesson, let's review real quick. Sally copied a paragraph from an online article she found for her class paper, and she cited it in her work cited. Is this okay or not okay? Next one. Stephen put a picture in his presentation, and he cited where he got the picture from. Okay or not okay? Timmy recorded a song from a movie soundtrack and used it as a background music for his book trailer. Okay or not okay? Mary paraphrased some information she found on a website for her project, then cited it in her works cited. Okay or not okay? One more. What about memes like this? Are they okay to use or not okay use of copyright? Any questions before we move on? Okay, so now it's time to show what you have learned about copyright. Go to this link and take the final test. And remember, don't forget to ask yourself these questions as you're researching and creating. Am I stealing someone else's ideas or work? Am I using a fair amount of someone else's work? Is this a legal way to use this material? And am I giving credit to whoever created this?